folks, Mr. Tolly. I'm going to do a simple fold-over sheath for my Kepart pattern knife. When I had this made, I had the blade made just a touch longer, and the handle I didn't want as long because I want it in the palm of my hand. I don't want it sticking out because I don't need it that way. So I had it made the way that I wanted it, which is one thing about custom knives that you can't get in the store. Got my piece of manila folder here. This is what I use for making my patterns. You know, they last a while. This is for a one-off knife. I really wouldn't need to do it, but you never know when it'll come in handy. So I'm going to simply start here. I want to mark there and there so I know where the back of the handle is. One tool that is wonderful to have when you're doing pattern work is a square, because I can set it, kind of square everything up there. And I can draw my mark. Line up on the next one. And draw my mark. That should be just the right size to fit the knife in. I'm going to go 1/2 inch. Keep it in mind, this is going to be the edge for where the blade edge is going to go. It's also going to have the strap on it that's going to fold over for the belt loop. So I'm going to add 1/2 inch and that's to the edge side. That's going to allow me enough room to put my welt in, make my stitch lines, all that kind of stuff. When I do a sheath like this, I always leave it the welt. I'll make it a lot thicker at the top here so that it doesn't pull apart. It seems like every time I see one of these, you stick the knife in and it starts pulling apart at the top here. We don't want that to happen any more than necessary, so I make my welt 3 layers thick is what it winds up being. Looking out my window here, it started snowing. We've been waiting for it. We're supposed to have a big storm tonight. Up to 1 foot, they say. On the back side, I know that my handle is about 1 inch thick down here. So I want to come off of the back side 3/4 of an inch, and that is going to allow for the thickness of my leather. And that is that. I'm going to draw everything on one side, and then I'll just crease it at this fold, or this mark will be a crease, and I'll fold it over, mark everything on the other side. I want to go not all the way up the handle, but far enough that it's going to be secure in the sheath. I have to allow enough at the bottom for the tip. So I want to be about 1/2 inch up. And I'm going to make a mark. my square, I set over here. I'm just going to line up with one of my lines here because they should all be square. And just make a mark across there. I'm going to freehand a little curve to it. So we'll come around this way. It doesn't have to be anything real fancy. Some people like to get fancy. I'm just going to do a real simple arch. These here are going to turn into the belt loop. I may have to add a little on, but that's okay. We basically have our design. I'm going to go ahead and straighten out some of these lines that didn't quite come all the way down here. And I'm going to make a mark half an inch up so I know where my tip has got to go. Now Chris Hayes frog lubes every one of his blades. This blade is made of D2 tool steel, which is hard stuff once it's been hardened. I think it's, I had him temper it back to about a 58, 59 Rockwell, so it's still pretty hard. Should hold an edge really well. And I just want to get kind of a rough idea of where the blade is going to be. So I want to keep my ½ inch, and I'll just come along here and make some marks following that edge at ½ inch. And we'll just kind of connect the dots. Now some of this will change as we go, just because that's kind of the nature of it. This is a rough pattern. I will actually fold the leather around the knife after I get it rough cut to this and make sure that it's going to fit. And then we'll go from there. I don't want to leave a sharp edge at either point here. So what I like to do is I got an assortment of washers here. This is a fender washer. And we'll just kind of lay it in there. And give it a little bit of an arch there so that it's not a hard edge. When you got a hard edge there, they tend to tear. And that might be too big of an arch, at least on this side. So I like them both to be the same too, because I'm kind of, I guess they call that anal retentive or OCD or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to grab a different washer. It's a little smaller fender washer. And I just find that these are a good way to get that desired curve. And being metal, you can run your blade right up against them and not have to worry about wrecking them. Plastic, you'll wreck that. And that's kind of the rough idea here. When I go to fold this, I want a good clean fold. So I'm going to take my blade and I'm just going to score it. And that way I know it's going to fold right on that score mark. Perfect like that. So, straighten her out a bit. And we'll just start cutting it out. My lighting here, I don't know what I need to do with this light, but it's an evolving process. Get rid of that piece right here and right here. I'm going to put some alignment marks. That's because I'm going to cut this top off and reattach it when I get to that point. So now we can fold that over and just trace it. A lot of this will change as we go. And it's kind of, you know, like I said, this is a rough pattern. And when I cut this, I want to cut to the inside of this line if I can. And you don't have to cut with an X-Acto knife, you can use a scissors or whatever you want to. Well, that's not good. The one thing I hate about these is if you put a little too much pressure at the very tip, it'll break. And if you cut that right, you should be able to fold it over. And it's the same on both sides. And by golly, I did a pretty good job. We're done with that for now. We'll finish. We'll take this. Let's see. Line up our marks. We'll just take a piece of tape. Our alignment marks here. And go right like that. And with regular masking tape, I can still see through it. So I can still make my cut. So the back of this is just going to fold over. And I'm going to have to add a little to it, but that's okay. There again, we'll just use a little of ye old masking tape. So that's our rough pattern. And I think that's probably plenty for the belt loop. I keep a old belt blank here. Well, we can go a little farther even. Probably right about there. It's probably pretty good. Keep the belt right towards the top of the sheath. Everybody's a little different how they like to wear their knife. When I come down here to figure out where I'm going to cut it off, I want to come down. I always wear an 1.5 belt, but I'm going to come down 1 3/4 inch. 1 3/4 or 2 inches. That'll leave enough for the 1.5 belt to get through. So, and then I need to have enough to stitch on, which I like to leave at least 1 inch. I'm going to go with 1 1/4 here. And to make that, I'm just gonna, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Some people just line up their ruler on the edge. I have a center ruler. It's got a 0 in the middle. So I can line up on my mark, line up both my zeros, and I'll get a straight line. And I'm going to do what I just told you not to do, and cut along the plastic there. So I want to round that off a little, just so it doesn't catch as much. And like I said, you can just cut hold that washer down nice and tight, and you can cut right along it. Now we'll round it off on the edge there. So when we stitch it down, it'll be good and solid. The nice thing about doing it this way is I can still cut through the tape and move it over a little if I need to. And we may wind up doing that. So there we go. That's our rough pattern. I'm going to get a piece of leather and we'll start cutting it out on the leather. This is where it matters which the front and the back is.